John Hoffman, and I have a new co-host with me, Charlie Boehm, friend of the show, many time guest, now first time co-host.
I am so honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
That is exactly the response I was hoping for, and almost demand out of all of our guest hosts. So, with so much great fun stuff to talk about, I feel like just you know optimism abound. I don't know if you've been on the Reddit page lately, but there's a bingo board, like a bad DC United bingo, which is always the sign of a happy fan base. I feel like when you get to that point.
I've been using the gritted teeth emoji a lot lately in this context.
Yeah, that's where we are at. I think it's. I was listening to Tried and True's post game show, and it's funny to watch optimism die on a new show over the course of the season. Like, I mean, like, you have to eventually bend to the reality of the situation. But I think now we're all in the same. I don't know where else you could be in last place, but that's the mindset is now there. We're all
And not just last place, DFL, as
right.
As a Twitter friend used it the other day. Yeah.
Well, don't
Thanks
worry.
to the Quakes last night. Quakes
that
big
means
win.
that means we can get that's first overall college MLS Super Draft pick, right? Like, we've got to be excited about that, right?
That's the best framing.
Right? I think that's what we got to start. We got to start doing. Bringing Travis on every episode and start reviewing college soccer that's not happening.
Look, I do want to point out. I think we discussed it last time I was on. The playoff format, even by MLS's extremely historically generous standards, is the most generous it's been since the expansion era began. I want to say, I don't know what the percentage is, but what is it? 18 out of 26? No, 16 out of
20.
18. It's 18 teams out of 26 this year, which it's not quite 8 out of 10 like the OG days, but it's close.
It's really there should be a physical there should be corporal punishment, I think, for missing it. Like there should, like, they should line up on the goal line. They should get shots taken out their butt. I feel like I think that's where you go with it. Someone's got to pay.
This is close to relegation.
Right. What's the physical punishment we can inflict on these teams for being so bad? All right. So let's stop delaying it. Let's get to this. Let's review this 2-0 loss. Let's start with lineup changes. I feel like that's maybe where we're going to get some of the little bit of good out of this that we can find. Yordi Reyna makes his DC United debut. Griffin Yao gets a start, first of the year. Moses Nyman gets a start, first of his career. Chris Odoyatsam getting more starts this year than probably has had at any run in his previous career, both before his leave for medical reasons and after. And Julian Gressel started the game on the bench. So when you saw that lineup, did you feel? So I felt, I'm like, good. I've been asking to play the kids because we're bad and we lose a lot. So let's do that. What were your feelings when you saw that?
Yeah, look, I mean, DC United has. I'll pull up the results map here to get the full picture of it, but it's been a rough stretch, right? And when results go badly, it's logical to try some different options, give some kids a shot, give reserves a shot, maybe see what different relationships can have an effect on things. So I thought that part of it made sense. And I've been kind of banging the drum over the last couple of weeks when I talk about and think about DC United for shifting things in a younger direction, and not so much. I guess the conventional explanation is that you're looking ahead next year, but really, I don't think it's about that. I think the teenagers are ready now. I think they can hold their own, and so there is upside from that future mentality. But I think that they can bring something right now. So I was pleased to see that, and I want to point out too. A lot of people are describing this as rock bottom for DC, and this was, I guess, the loss run them to 5-game winless streak.
Steve Birnbaum said, if we lose this, we have to really have thoughts as a team about like what we're all about, what's even happening here. He said this is a must-win game right before the loss. So that's just the external mindset of the team.
And I would say, not to soften things, but there's a sense of rock bottom or new low sort of being hit from what I sense among DC United fans and observers. But don't write off the Revs in this. That's a good team. I think that's a team that's going to make noise, whether this year or next. A deep, well-constructed team on the up. So it wasn't that they lost to scrubs.
Oh, no, Nashville was a much lower low than this New England game.
Interesting. So you say that. I've heard some of the conversations I've had with other people. I'll leave names out of it, but I wasn't at the game, but some of the people in the press box, speaking with them, and I think there is a segment of people that feel like this was maybe because of that pregame framing of it as a must-win and the fact that it was at home, that this felt worse than Nashville. But of course, the team weren't blisteringly criticized as frauds by their own coach
right
after this result. So
I think that's a piece of it. I think the fact that Bill came out saying basically how we respond to this game will tell you where we are as a team listening to this coach, basically. So that was whenever he said that, I was like, I feel like this is going to go badly. I think he shouldn't have said that because I think they're not going to perform. That was probably dangerous. But anyway, did you see Julian Gressel starting on the bench a function of wanting to get Yao on the field, or did you see it as the only consequence of Ben saying this team looked like a fraud in Nashville, as far as maybe a punishing a senior player's lackluster performance?
I generally urge caution when it comes to making linear observations and conclusions about lineup changes, who's in and who's out. It's not as, I think it's oversimplified to.
We're family podcast.
My family just arrived home.
Family podcast. We enjoyed it. Good.
You can come here. It's okay. Thank you, baby. I don't think it should be interpreted as a slight or criticism of Gressel so much as just a change, and he was the one to sit. He's played a lot this year. He's been one of the ever-presents. I think they've been working really hard and trying to really build his sample size to try and get him settled and find the right role, and then get him performing at the level that they wanted to. So I don't think that. I think it's more about Yao than Gressel.
Okay, well that's a good point of view. The first half was certainly more positive than the second half, and we'll get to that. But there were moments of positivity. There still are issues, and this was more pronounced in the second half. I don't know if it's strategy. I don't know if it's just what they're given. I think it's what they're given based on the way New England was defending. But they just continue to push the ball full speed towards the end line and then try to cross the ball. And this team has a cross completion percentage from that sector of the field. It's got to be the lowest in the league. It is woeful. It is. And I remember watching Taylor Kemp cross the ball. I remember watching play like there are. Crossing has not been a strength of this team since 2010 when I've been watching it, but it feels especially bad, and because of that, feels like a really not a good offensive strategy to pursue to get offensive chances.
Well, I mean, who's the starter up top? Is Ola Kamara the clear number one? Is he really healthy and fit right now? What type? Do they even have the relationships built to a point? I'm not saying they should. I think they should
at this point,
but for whatever reason. You don't have the consistency. I mean, we talk about Gressel, right? You tried him in different roles, different spots, but he was an ever present in the lineup for the most part for most of the season. And I think a big part of it is he wants striker server relationships, right? The service relationships to get struck up and the understanding to get built. The season started, that was supposed to be Gressel and Flores and maybe a couple others serving Kamara, and his track record in the league, Ola's track record suggested that he could feast on quality service, not entirely and exclusively crosses and cutbacks, but that's definitely an area where he seemed to have a strong skill set. It hasn't come, and there's any number of sort of variables that go into why that didn't work, but it didn't. So I think it's hard to say. It's understandable that the rhythm or the understanding and the relationships aren't there, but then again, I'm suspicious of crossing in general because I think it's so quickly becomes this sort of thoughtless tactic or last resort, with a lot of players in MLS.
It's becoming the long two, right? I feel like particularly if you have a low completion percentage, you are giving up the ball basically in the attacking sector of the field where you want the ball and need the ball to be able to score. If you're completing a large percentage of them, then it's great because you're changing angles, you're making players move. But if you keep not completing them, you're basically just being like, well, I hope we get a corner. Maybe we'll get a corner out of this. And it's just it's from my perspective, it's frustrating. I feel like, obviously player personnel drastically different than when this was effective. But the give and goes at the top of the box between Rooney and Acosta were an interesting strategy as far as moving players around. We have enough overlapping runs from the midfield where I believe that those players are more effective passing in close proximity and finding open space in the box that way and shooting. And we just don't really do that. And I
would point out too. So using Opta's formation here, you're looking at this lineup, and you have so many new relationships and partnerships. I don't see how they could have possibly had a lot of time to work as an 11 in training. You can do film and whatever Zoom sessions and all that kind of stuff. But right now, these teams are playing every several days, and there's multiple coaches have complained of the sort of the inability to train on anything in depth and really work in depth on tactical stuff. But your band of three is Yao, Reyna, Assad, Kamara up top. Nyman got his first start behind them next to Moreno. How many of those players have played a full game together to know who's going to be where and who's going to do? I mean, we know Reyna just got off the plane, almost literally. He is kind of a freelancing type of player when he plays well in general, based on his Caps career. So, it's you're trying some stuff, and I'm sure he'd want to get a lot more reps in training in trying stuff in this situation normally, but you don't have that luxury. So
Kamara's been there though, right? They should know the runs he's going to make at this point. Even if they're not, even if Yao and Nyman have not been in the starting 11 in practice, which they have clearly not been, they will have been playing against him. They will have been watching him. They will understand the kind of balls he likes. Jordi Reyna is a question mark for them, obviously. But still, I mean, I think I get that, particularly from the context of all of the injuries that have caused, however many games we've had is probably how many lineups we've had. But there have been historically teams with greater number of injuries. I thought of Kansas City where they could only dress like 13 or 14 players. I forget what year that was, but they had a run like that. They weren't successful in that run, clearly, but also I feel like the concept of the only player they shouldn't really understand is Jordi Reyna and the other forward whose name escapes me because Gelson
Rivas.
Yes, Gelman Rivas. Those are the only two players that are real question marks for them. They should understand the rest of their teammates, even if it's not going to be beautiful and perfect because, like you said, they haven't had the practice time in the midweek because they've been playing every 3 games. But anyway.
But let's not. I feel like the elephant in the room here is how much of the ball you really have, right? This team reflexively seems to drop deep, and I don't know whether that's a product of their sort of personality as a team or the tactical work or instincts that they've developed individually or collectively, or if it's Ben's preference, or if it's just not being good on the ball. But they almost never win the possession battle. They're not a generally proactive team. And so therefore then your ability to build understanding and rhythm is limited. You have to be efficient if you're going to play against the ball and counter, right? And you have to be clean with your decision making and have that at least a minimum level of understanding of movements and transition.
And minimal individual mistakes in the defensive end.
Yeah, I mean it's just too. I just think they regress to a defensive. Maybe bunkering is not fair to use, but definitely a reactive posture. As a team. And let's be honest, I mean, I figure we're going to get to this eventually, but post-game, Ben Olsen says, we had a few chances that once again we have to do better with. We are never a team that puts up 10 to 12 shots. We haven't been that for a few years. The times we've been successful are when we are efficient.
And all of DC United fandom said, yeah, we know we had not been a team that had 12 or 15 shots. That's the problem. That's why we're all angry. That's why we've all not had a lot of fun watching this team. It is weird. It's like we'll get to this now, I think, because I think it talks about it goes into everything, really. I think the idea that Ben is still set on is that the only way we can be successful, there's one mode of success, and it is to to take advantage of a minimal number of opportunities, be exceedingly stringent on the defensive side, and then just eke out wins. And that I don't know if he still thinks that way because of the player assets at his disposal, or it's meant, because I think that there have been times this season where he has criticized his team, like saying after the New York City FC game where they had no shots. The next game, the first half started out in a similar, not the first half, but there was a question of like, that's not the way we drew this game up. We wanted to be more on the front foot, and we weren't, and players were more reactive. I can't wrap my head around the lack of effort in trying and failing to be offensive is a way to get fired in some ways. But once you've been there 10 years, like, don't you kind of just want to see what happens if that's the way you go? If you're going to go out, I think you tweeted about this today. If you're going to be bad, go out trying, be interesting, try something new. And if you lose 7-1, say for instance, like some teams have done this year in trying things out and having a team that's skewed towards young players, then that's what happens. And you can make that argument after the fact and say, this is what I was trying to do. But it feels like a situation where he is constitutionally opposed, or maybe incapable of going that way, of going that route.
I see it a little differently. I don't think it's that I think that the port in the storm, or the touch point for Ben Olsen as a coach, when the ish hits the fan and things are going against his team, or he needs a result, he needs to end a slump. For him, it is coaching 101 in one sense, that you start at the bottom, right? You start at the beginning. Defensive shape is always the first thing you work on in most cases in preseason. That's the foundation of your team. You try and post a clean sheet and get a little bit of shape and structure, and then build off of that. That's your foundation. It makes a lot of sense. It's what probably a majority of coaches would do in his situation. Not all, though. And at the professional level, it is a risk-averse approach, carries risks in and of itself, right? And for me, the biggest thing, again, a lot of projecting was happening on that tweet from today. I'm not going to say, I don't think I was referring to any specific team, but a lot of people felt that I was speaking about their team,
which is an indictment of a bunch of teams.
But that's also the time of year we're at. This is we're getting into the stretch run where teams have to stare some realities in the face. You're either going to contend or you're not. You have a good vibe about your squad, or you're in position to make a run or you're not. The reality sets in when the weather cools down, right? But I just think, we could get into maybe an attempt to analyze him, and that's always risky. But perhaps, when I think back to the 2010 season where he kind of got stuck got shoved into the head coaching role when everything was just crumbling in the Analfo, the ill-fated half season in charge that Kurt Analfo got here in DC. And things
the year they removed the bagels, the year the front office took away the bagels is the year that I remember.
I'd forgotten about that. In some ways, yeah. We're on I think we just passed the 10-year anniversary. It was July. I want to say it was early August. It was the first coach, if I'm remembering correctly, that DC United had ever technically fired. Kevin Payne was, I don't want to say proud, but always made a point to note that Ray Hudson wasn't fired. Thomas Wrong and those guys, contracts were allowed to expire. People were allowed to move on when it made sense at the end of the year. But this was the first, we have to make a change right now. This is so bad. And that team wanted to play. Christian Castillo, a number of other signings that they had. Analfo wanted to ping the ball around and be proactive. And Ben so sort of inherited that, and they would play good stuff. And you could argue it happened again in 2013. They would ping the ball around. They would be the more assertive team. They would be in the ascendancy in games, and then they would get stabbed, right? They would give up a goal on a set piece, or they would get broken down on a counter, and everything, went sideways again. And I don't know if he got burned on some level, tactical or psychological, by that experience, and felt like, and he's used terms like earn the right to play and said things like that he just, I think Ben can't or won't depart from that idea that if we can't, we have to walk before we run. And maybe that's, again, statistically, maybe he's right, but I think the context right now, there's so much frustration in the fan base there's so much underperformance as a group. There's so much change in the league. There's so much evolution. Like, just, people have had it. There's a different feeling this time around, from what I'm kind of picking up.
Yeah, they have so had it that in 11 days between quotes from the front office, between anonymous quotes in the front office, it has gone from basically a wait and see approach and say, things aren't great, but there's a lot of reasons for it, to Ben Olsen's seat is the hottest seat that is molten
scalding
hot seat, the hottest of seats, and not a lot amount of time, and only in 2 games. One of them was against Nashville. And Goff sources called the game unwatchable, the loss unwatchable. It was bad. I don't know that it was uniquely bad. I think it was very bad. I think it maybe was cumulative. Maybe it was the fact that they assumed, looking at the schedule like we all did at the beginning of the year, like, all right, well, there's 3 points, and FCC Cincinnati, that's 3 points, and it's going to be a rough year, particularly with no Paul, but we'll scrape on through. We always do. We'll get the draws where we need them, and we'll get the easy wins, the wins that we should get. So, aside from those 2 games that happened, do you think that the perception of the fan base, the being concerned about next year, hoping that they're able to have fans in the stadium next year, hoping that they're going to be selling season tickets next year and not doing what they've had to do this year where they're deferring, are they starting to actually look at the diehard fan base and seeing people who have been, not that they know on the granular level like I do, where I know people on Twitter, but like people who have been long time, just like, it's not his fault. Like we've overperformed based on a whole bunch of other host of reasons. So, that's not where to look for accountability. Those people are all, I don't want to say uniformly, but largely on the train of, we need to make a move here. They're somewhat past excuses for underperformance. What do you think changed do you think Steve asked different people and got a different change over that kind of time? What could have changed so much to make them feel this way?
Yeah.
Get a guess.
I was really struck by, I think, the Post report dropped on Saturday morning, maybe. So September 15th, I just want to underscore this, because I think it says something about the front office and as well as the whole situation overall and the ownership. To go from will not have to worry about his job status, barring endless embarrassing defeats.
Endless.
On September 15th, to Ben is not on the hot seat. He's on a scalding hot seat on the 26th. I think that was conscious. Someone in a position of power, or multiple people, made a point to shift that framing so abruptly. And I really want to know why. And I have a feeling it's not going to work out as well as they may think it is by doing that, because that's such a stark flip that you then have to, it's almost like that outweighs the temperature of the seat for me, just because it's so striking and so.
It's like, did you just start paying attention? Like, did you just realize?
Did they scroll through the DCU hashtag for the first time in a few months, or was there was there a player executive chat that organically or scheduled that happened? Was there someone visit the locker room? And we don't know these things, right? Because even when you go to cover the game, you're not that different from anyone at home. You're stuck in the press box. You get 2 or 3 people on the post-game Zoom, right? So you don't get to kind of lurk around in the tunnels downstairs and see what's happening, and so that's frustrating from a journalistic standpoint, because to have, again, like anybody who's covering the team or talking to people around the team, you're always, you try and talk to as many people as you can and build enough perspectives to triangulate and get a clear sense of what's going on. But I think it says for them to make that shift, that it's these 2 games. It wasn't like these 2 games were, I don't buy the idea that Nashville somehow was this like Rubicon that was crossed.
It wasn't unique. It was just a bad game and they lost on the road.
There's been a few of them, right? And the injury crisis is no better or worse now than it was 11 days ago or 15 days
well,
ago.
they got Russell back that game before. That was that game where he got a red card at halftime, right? Or the games
first
together
half? Yeah, sounds maybe so. I mean,
I think they got a couple players back.
My point is that it's clearly, the a for better or worse situation in American soccer is you're dependent on the whims of a rich person. It's usually a guy, right? It's usually a rich or white guy, or a few of them. The whims of the rich owners that write the checks inevitably become inflated, become outsized, because they are the final decision makers. And Jason Levian is he is somewhat an owner and somewhat an executive and the managing partner, but he has to live in this world where he's trying to guide and inform the money people above him on the totem pole, while also being responsive to them and being, meeting their needs. And that's so I don't know. I don't know if it's at Jason's level, if it's Dave Casper, which I'm less.
That doesn't sound right.
Sure of that, or if it's someone in Kaplan's group, or if it's one of the other Swansea affiliated owners. Something happened. Someone figured something out or saw something, and maybe it was the end of month. I don't know what it was. Fiscal year, whatever.
Ben turned in an expense report that had too many.
But suddenly, yeah, I mean, look, like Ben is officially on the hot seat, right? They made sure to make that as official as it gets, and they were conscious about doing that. And I just want to know what changed to suddenly now that it's more Ben's fault. Yeah, they've been absolutely just eviscerated by injuries. The club record signing just didn't settle, right? And then when he finally started to show some signs of progress, he breaks his face, right? So then there's an ACL injury, and there's this and there's that, and there's so many factors here. This year is weird in general. So there was a sense, I think, when things got going again at MLS's back and the season resumed last month, that this would be an asterisk season, right? That there would be maybe more leeway, or coaches and exec in front, technical staff people would maybe get a mulligan. It appears not. Frank de Boer suffered this, and now maybe Ben has been informed in definitely in public, maybe in private, maybe both, that he is coaching for his job de facto over the next 2 months or so.
I think that's a good distinction to draw out, because this is a coach who's been there for 10 years. There have probably been years when there have been less extenuating circumstances and just as much reason to get rid of him. Just as much fan dissatisfaction, play on the field, results, whatever. There have been years where it's been less, where you could write it off. And this is the year they've decided to enforce accountability, even if it's maybe not necessarily fully attributable to him. And I think you would have to say it's not. Looking at this roster, you can't say this is all about Ben, why we're in the place we're at. But this is the year that they've decided to do it. So I personally am in favor of accountability for the one position the one role of the team you can easily change. You can't get rid of 11 players at once. You can bring in a new coach with a new philosophy and new ideas. That's easy. You can bring that. You could do that every year if you wanted to. It's not a good way to build a winning franchise, but you could do it if you wanted to do it. So I'm in favor of accountability. The timing seems weird to me. I think at the beginning of the year, understanding that he had a contract for next year, we're like, this is probably going to be this is a mulligan year. The fans who wanted him gone already will still want him gone, but he's going to play out his contract because this team is loath to pay somebody twice. And I still don't understand where they're going to put him next year with this like step down contract, where they're going to put him somewhere else. Like as a fan, like as an ambassador, a brand, like a DC United brand ambassador, is he going to go to like Modell stores and sign soccer balls? Like where could you put him? Where could you put a former coach in a team bubble, like a team umbrella that makes sense for him or for the team? Maybe a problem we'll figure out next year. Maybe it'll be just like a what do you call it? Like a not abstentia, but like where you emeritus role. Like it's like you're a front office employee, right?
Well, I mean, there's guys like Frankie Haydick and Brad Evans who are driving team branded whips around town, and
you don't see Ben doing that, dude. I don't see Ben handing out Monster energy drinks in front of the front gate.
Ben would be good at this, but I know he doesn't want to do it, and I understand, as he has said, he's said some really over the years, he said some very thoughtful things about, you get in the corner office, you don't want to give that back, right? I will, and again, I think I'm repeating myself here to you, but I am increasingly convinced that he and others like him who got that fast track to that head coaching job at their their club, their their these iconic figures really got their coaching careers kneecapped. They're just on a weird. He's gonna have to decide whether he wants to be a coach anymore, whether he wants to stay in this organization, whether he needs to walk away. He's got some tough decisions whenever things run out. I don't know that it's happening yet. I certainly will say that one of the most jarring things about the Scalding hot seat line was so that there's an implication there that he could get fired at any moment. Well, why are you gonna what's gonna reason? Why would you fire? So let's say they lose 5-0 next time out, and so you can him. Well, so okay, you did something, but you've written off the season effectively in that sense. That's a tough block. Unless you have to be really convinced that Nolan Sheldon or whoever you plug in his spot is going to be can like light a fire under the same group of players.
Ryan Martin's free now
to make it worth it.
Ryan's got nothing going on, so he could slide in.
I mean, that honestly, like that's a tough spot for those guys to put those guys in. And then you have to go, well, okay, does this ownership group and does this front office have the wherewithal and the sort of personality to go and build? If you're going to make a change now, a calculating club is going to go and arrange something in shadow and then have it ready to flip the switch, right? You've got, I don't know, Wilmer Cabrera or whoever, someone lined up, kind of a bullpen option here. And then that leads to a whole other conversation. Like, well, so you did this in secret and you did this to this club legend. And now then you tell him you're going to keep paying him to hang around. And like, it's going to be, I don't see how it's not messy. I'll be very impressed with all involved if it's not a messy parting. And I, maybe this is a spot to say this, like, and it's going to, I'm afraid it's going to come off condescending, but I have real doubts about whether being an MLS head coach is the way that Ben Olsen wants to spend this next phase of his life and his career, because he really, it strikes me every time I sit in on a press conference. He just has the weight of the world on his shoulders. Yep. He has this haunted's not the right word, but he has this really tortured vibe about him. And on a personal level, and as much as I've been able to get to know him as a person, given our, sort of, contrasting job descriptions, like I want Ben Olsen to be happy because he's an amazing human being, right? He's a great person. No matter what happens with his coaching career, he's a great human being. And I hope that either things at the club change or something. There's I think we're at this point. There's this fin de siècle kind of feeling right now for all involved.
I think that's really, really spot on. You watch the press conferences. He's got the not the sad Mourinho vibe, but there was a time where the joy was gone from his press conferences and his managerial career. He had a lot of things going on in his personal life that caused that, I think, and then also the repeated bad results in the media that was just on his head. Ben does not have the media scrutiny that clearly does not have the media scrutiny of a Mourinho. But as far as like, he's got to feel like he's in a Groundhog Day situation over this period of time, right? Like I feel like he's had to give the same answers about the same performances and the same players. I could understand if it was starting to lose a little bit of the spark. Like he knows that next year ownership is not going to be like, all right, now we're really gonna bust loose. Like I know we only spent $4 million this year. We're going to spend $8 million next year. What do you need? What would allow you to play the kind of soccer that fans want to see, and we'll pay for it? Like that's not going to happen. So from his perspective,
I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what the question that he and the club have to answer, everyone involved to answer, is what is going to change?
Yeah, who do we want to be, and what are we going to do to be that? Do you think? I wonder about Jason Levian's visibility and media availability and public persona and what he says about the team. To my mind, you get about 3 quotes out of him a year. And you get a quote at the end of the season when we fall out of the playoffs or don't make it. You get a letter saying next year we're going to do better. We're going to analyze all of this and we're going to make decisions based on that. You get something in preseason after a new player signed about how great we feel about this new signing. And, we're making all these unprecedented investments in the future of this club. And it's a great time to be a DC United fan, which is clearly that's the sell season tickets media availability. And then that's kind of it. Like there's not, and I don't want to say that it's good to hear from the owner during the season about results. Like that's probably not productive. That's Merritt Paul. We can't all be Merritt Paulson, and you probably don't want all owners to be like that. But I feel like, and I've said this on the show, and I've I'd love to speak to him or any of the ownership group after the season, after they've made any decision they're going to make on coaching, and really have them explain to me and to the fan base and everybody else, uh, who do we want this team to be in a few years. We're not Atlanta. We're not going to be Atlanta. Understand that. We're not complete naive fans. We understand the way of the world. We understand money. But what are we going to be, and what are we going to do to get there? And I don't want to hear about capital investments, understanding that capital investments limit the money you can spend during the year, but don't care now. Like, give me your strategy that doesn't cost money, and then we'll see where we're at. I'm hyper committed, right? I've got a show about this. I don't get paid for it, but like obviously I bought in, so I'm there. I'm going to keep covering it no matter what. This is it's my own personal brain disease. But everyone else, you got to give them a reason to stay engaged in a last place team that does not have any media, doesn't have top 4 media presence in the DC market, is not a attractive destination for potential coaches or players in general, both because of their performance and because it's not Miami, it's not LA, it's not whatever. So international targets. Think about that still. So you've got to give the other people, everybody else, the casual / not fully life committed, DC United fan, a reason to stick around, and they don't do that very much anymore, I feel like.
Well, then we get into whole new levels of the conversation, because the off-field, the relevance in the community, the relationship with the fan base, that's all, there's layer upon layer of history and nuance, and it's a tough spot. And you have, let's be honest, like this is as long as it's been since the last championship, and the 4 stars came a long time ago. But that still is part of the character, and it's in the room, and it influences people's perspectives. The fan base, this is a cosmopolitan area with a lot of soccer culture, high expectations. I think probably more so than a typical MLS market. It's not like an expansion spot where they're going to turn out and watch and be excited, and it's like it doesn't have the newness anymore. You do have to deal with the history that you carry and try and spin it in a positive way and find something useful there. And again, I think that, and maybe it's just because I've been writing about it, and they were one of the stories of the weekend. But compare the team that was in the wooden spoon race, topping the wooden spoon race 24 hours ago, San Jose Earthquakes. They have some of the same problems. They're a proud club that's been treading water for some time. They don't spend a ton of money on their roster. So there's big headwinds when they brought in Almeida, but at the very least, they have a personality. There's a culture there, even if it has flaws. They are interesting. There are storylines to follow. Their fans have felt the lows DC United fans have, maybe lower this year and last year, but yet they've had these euphoric moments. And even if I think it's worth chewing on. Like, why does when the Quakes win that game in injury time last night against LAFC, and the bench and the players go absolutely nuts, like they won a championship, right? And then compare that to the last year or two under Ben. He himself has admitted when he loses, it eats away at him and it ruins his life, and when he wins, it's just relief. And that's that job.
Yep.
That's what comes with that job. So maybe there's no getting around that sometimes. But I think that's also not because of him, but that also just reflects the zeitgeist of DC United right now. The injury time fluky win over the Red Bulls doesn't taste as sweet as that loss to the Revs the other night does sour. And so somehow that equation, something needs to change in that equation. I think Ben now is going to have to sort of build on the fly a little bit of a pitch for what the identity is going to be. Now, I will say, not that long ago, a couple weeks ago, they made a point to announce that the academy is now all player fees have been removed from that. Tried to sort of create turn a page there and point to the possibility of becoming a more homegrown academy oriented club. you can do that. I mean,
Yep.
you can, even if you don't spend your own money on DPs, you can field a really good, interesting team in this league now, just with league money. Dave Casper is one of the best in the league at maximizing the decentralized resources that everybody gets. So I think there is some potential out there for something compelling, but they have to be able to explain it very quickly, internally and externally, and then show progress. Between now and season's end.
That's absolutely a route, and we've said it on the show. Most fans will sit for that. Like they will, if you tell them that we're going to bring in local kids and that's going to be the nucleus of this team, and if they do well, we're going to sell them on, and then you can go watch them in the Bundesliga on Saturday mornings. People are going to sign up for that. They'll pay for that. It is. I think you said the last time we had in the show, they got to do both, right? They've got to do that, and they've got to keep signing players, and that's true. Like that. I think that to actually compete, you could do that one thing. You could just be the young team, but then you're FC Dallas, and you also don't win anything. That's fine. Like that's. You're good. You're a better team than you would be doing where we're at right now, but it's not going to win you trophies, and that is the overall desire that we're looking for.
See, I don't know. So just again, maybe to offer up a data point from elsewhere in the league, Axel Schuster. Whitecaps are another team that are in a similar position to DC United. They've been losing more than they've been winning for some time now. It's not clear how long the coach's leash is, Mark Dos Santos. It's not clear what their identity is. They're dealing with headwinds on and off the field. Their sporting director and CEO, Axel Schuster, did a pretty lengthy media roundtable. I think it was Thursday night that I sat in on. And he specifically pointed, this is a team and so the fans let me know later, hey, our rivals are Toronto and Seattle. So that's who we compare ourselves to, right? But Schuster said, I love the Philadelphia Union model. I love how they did a slow build. They have an identity. They have the homegrowns. They have the style. And while Caps fans, not all of them loved hearing that because the Philadelphia Union haven't won anything. That is actually not an uncommon sentiment, right? People are looking now.
That's Ted's hope. Ted's hope is that we become the Union.
Well, then, so keep that in mind, and then shift and think about the Philly result over the weekend. Gonzalo Higuain, the highest paid player in the league, comes and makes his debut at their house in a rainstorm. Philadelphia, I have never seen that team, that club perform at such a high level and such a character sort of appropriate level in such a manner. Like that was a Philly team. They have actualized themselves, I dare say, even if they haven't won a trophy yet, because they were themselves. They had two homegrown score for them. And then they were clearly eager to upstage the $7 million man, Higuain.
And they threw batteries at Higuain after he missed.
Troll the hell out of him after he misses a PK, right? And it was like Philly sports suddenly, on an MLS pitch, and it was like, oh my God, I was impressed. And I think my question to DC as a club and the fan base as a collective is like, okay, so what's the DC United version of that? Is it like, Echeverry and Moreno Showtime 98, or is it like Peter and Freddie and Ryan Nelson in 04, or is it something, whatever, like have that conversation. I think if the club was smart and proactive, they would lean in a little bit there.
Yeah. I can imagine, I can imagine a former executive who's no longer here having a supporters group conversation in the off season about what would you guys like to see? Well, let's focus group what our identity should be. I'd even take that now. Actually, honestly, I'd take a phone call, a Zoom call with leadership to try to figure that out. Because that's probably something they want to know. If they're just saying fans would like to win, that's not instructive or helpful for them and the choices that they make. So believe it or not, like I outlined this show, it was not going to be this, but it just turns into this. The team is the games are not interesting. The losses are accumulating by force. So there's a few bright spots, and I think maybe we have a little bit of time to talk about a few of those bright spots. But generally, I think that's where we're at right now. Is we are on the heels of this change in tone from the team about Ben Olsen's job security and lack thereof, and the fact that we have about 37 games in the next 30 days. It feels like with still a halved roster and very little hope, despite Ben's comments about we just need 3 wins and we're in this thing. The only thing that is of substance and matters to to fans, I think, is it feels like if we're saying that Ben is in a scalding hot seat, and we don't think this team is going to turn around, we're mentally already at the end of the season. We're already saying, all right, the owners are still the owners, the players are still the players, even if he goes. And all the questions that we just talked about are the things that matter. So that's where the show is probably going to, for better or worse, and probably for worse for some of the folks I talked to with the team, that's probably what the focus is going to be with this show in the next month, because I don't see the field, the results in the field changing that. But to try to talk about something quickly good, Nyman and Yao, I think Yao, who had sort of seemed in witness protection even up until 2 games ago, was getting 10 minutes stints with DC in the second halves of losing games. The goal that he scored turned the narrative around. I feel like from the fan perspective, the conversation changed about him. It was all Kevin Paredes because he was playing and doing well, and Griffin Yao became sort of the forgotten man. Griffin scores a goal, and now the fans are clamoring for him to start every game and do what he does. I think he looked pretty good. I think that he has. I have to look at the stats, but even just completed dribbles and player duels from the wing on that side, I've not seen a lot of those do well with other players who have been not just Gressel, but anybody who's been on that side. I'm happy with him getting as many minutes as possible for the rest of the season and seeing what he can put together. His problem last year at Loudoun was he just ran out of gas, and we had an interview with him, and it was very much he attributes a lot of that to mentality and sort of not really understanding what it takes to succeed, and also feeling that drop off when he went to go to Loudoun. It's a different environment, he says. Practicing with that team is different. It was very candid, and I was impressed with that. But like I think that you need to see you've got to see where you're at with him going forward. Even understanding where Paul's going to play when he's healthy, you still want to figure out what he's about and what he can bring to this team. And how do you think he performed in a longer stint in his first start for the year?
Well, I think I'm leery of even getting too much into this game, because
maybe the fact that he played is more important than how he played.
Yeah, I mean that he got a shot. I think he's already shown even before this game enough to get more of those. I think there's multiple good reasons to shift your 11 in a younger direction, and again explore relationships. See how give players time to play together. I understand, like when you're I was just looking at it. They've got 9 games left in the season, so they're going to play 2 months worth of soccer, which would typically be a 2-month cycle in less than 6 weeks
with half a team,
right? And so yeah, and that's tough. But like the one thing you can say about the teenagers is like they're not like you and me. They can recover. They can play 2 games in a week and they enjoy it because it's one less training session than normal, right? So let them go. Like give them some minutes, because I think that the thing that with young players in general, you give them a shot, they may take it and maximize it one day, and they may kind of flub their opportunity the next. The question is always the length, this consistency, finding a rhythm, finding a way to do it week in, week out, whatever state you're in mentally, your body, whatever. So you're always going to have the excitement and the jitters and the positive butterflies of, a rare start. Then it's like, so the next step is like, and with Nyman too, like get him in there, get him reps, volume. And I want to see some new relationships, because when you talk about a starting 11, we tend to look at that as 11 players, but it's a web, right? So right. You've had the better part of a year now to try your preferred relationships, and whether you can't use them because of injuries or they're just not good enough because you have the results in front of you now, try some different relationships, So I would love to see, the kind of thing like a fullback with a wide attacker. Let them play together, let them form patterns of play. And again, all coaches will remind you in MLS right now, like there's not a lot of time to work on that stuff, but you can still do it. And
you got 90 minutes 9 times, right? Even if that's all you have, you got it.
Think about 9 games too. I mean, you're saying, I think you're a little fatalistic just now to say that that's going to be the story from here on out, but it doesn't take much. The attention span and the life cycle of this league is still so short to where if they just put together a few decent results, they can start to think about themselves in a different way, and we'll be talking about them in a different way. Like they need something positive. I don't think that the season is lost. Obviously, that's the trajectory that they're on right now. But it doesn't take much. I just think everybody involved is going to have to be give each other a little bit more credit. Getting in the playoffs that only tells you so much this year. Even putting a few results together in the postseason only tells you so much. That's not going to placate the fan base here.
No, and actually the quote even said that this time. I think that was always, the concern was always if the bar is only getting in, if this year it's easier than it has been in 10 years to get in, then it means even less. So that really can't be the bar. But yeah, I mean, to your point, listen to our show after a win. There haven't been that many of them this year. There's been 2, but listen to it after a win, and the optimism reigns because it has to. Like, it's a fan podcast, but
this is what we have sports in our lives for.
Correct. To bring us momentary highs in a perpetual lull. So
the season ends the same week as the election this year. So
wonderful.
Season. So you got that.
So you got that going for you. We've got 6 minutes here left of the show. I suppose so. This is as much previewing as I'm going to do. I'm going to give you some information. Say you haven't been watching Atlanta games this year. They're the next game. We played them twice in the next 9 games. They're 4-8-2. They've fired their head coach, who is now the head coach of the Netherlands, which is wild. So if Ben Olsen gets fired, look for him to coach a national team of high renown. They have transferred the former South American Player of the Year to Saudi Arabia, so that he's gone. They've signed Marcelinho Moreno from Lanús, who that's also the former club of Miguel Almiron, which I thought there was a DC United link, and I spent about 5 minutes trying to figure out if there was a former player from Lanús, but that might have been a rumor player that we never actually got. They lost the last 5 games. They've lost to Miami. They've lost to Nashville. They lost again to Miami. They beat FC Dallas, and then they lost to Chicago. I have down here maybe the last winnable game of DC United season. You've already said I'm being a little fatalistic, but that's absolutely true. They play them twice. I'm not going to ask you to make, sort of get too deep in it, but this is if you look at the rest of the schedule, this has got to be a game where you want to, if we're talking about, we got to win a couple games to sort of get that confidence and get that belief in the team, which is the same thing we said before this New England game, as a matter of fact, and so did the players. This is really that. So if we said it before, we really mean it now. I feel like that's what they've got to approach that as, got to win this.
Yeah, I mean, this Atlanta is they're a shadow of their former selves. And maybe their fan base is hurting in a different way because they've gone from this rarefied air to getting humbled so quickly. Arguably, maybe they just had the expansion reality check sort of delayed a little bit, but they are 3, 5. They are
4, 8,
1-5-2 in their last.
Yeah, it's not going good.
Yeah, in their last run of matches, and just this team is really when you watch them on the field, they're unrecognizable from the run and gun Showtime greatest show on turf, that they were the first few years, and even for parts of last year. Obviously, Joseph Martinez is one of the most irreplaceable players in this league. So that's tough, but they've had, after sort of hitting everything out of the park their first few years of MLS existence, they've been rolling snake eyes lately. The players that have left have not been replaced by players of similar quality and stature, and then they've had one psychological hit after another. I mean, the Frank de Boer regime did not seem to be a happy place for anybody. The culture clash was drastic and was really visceral. And so now they've got to pick themselves up off the floor, and they don't have a lot of sort of inspiring go-get-em type characters and match winners who can lift the team by the scruff of the neck. So it's a tough spot for Atlanta. I think definitely, even though home field advantage has been diminished this year, DC has got to go out and try and attack this game, because this is a team they're playing that's low on confidence, that should not be allowed to sort of find their feet against DC United. Yeah,
if we're their get right game, then you can really start bringing the moving boxes in. I think if we're where they find their confidence again, if we're their season slump buster, it's a bad sign. Would not be a new sign. I have a sad stat that is a classic. I forget who started it originally on Twitter, the DC United Sad Stats. I know Pablo was involved, but there was someone else too.
I feel like that may have been an open wide for some soccer.
I might have
piece been. With Thomas and Seth as well. Yeah.
So they need 1 win or 3 draws in the remaining 9 games to avoid the 2013 point total. I believe the number of games played will be different, but that's still something to be concerned about. It's a number to watch. There's already going to be an asterisk next to any results in the historical MLS record book, but I just personally would like to avoid that numerical total again. I think that would be good. That would be a one positive thing you could do.
Well, for better, like it or not, PPG may become prominent this season, because we may not even be able to have every team in the league for the same number of games. But so if we break it down to that, DC United as of now are 2-7-5 with a 0.79 points per game rate. And if we go back to 2013, I don't recall.
I don't know either. I just looked at the total.
0.47 PPG back in 2013, 3-24-7. So arguably, they can stay on trend. You can just win once in a while, pick up a few points. They'll be okay there. But you don't want to even have this conversation, right? You don't want to have an asterisk next to your explanation of why this wasn't the worst year ever. You've got to win. Try and win.
Just win one
or more.
Just win one and draw one, and then we can never talk about this again. It's fine.
Yeah, but it's and there are other games that if you look at the table, look at the schedule. We've got Montreal coming to town on decision day. But again, you don't want to fast forward to that sort of point. But there's games that they can win. There's games that they can get points. And again, the bar is so low. I mean, even just it's just a win, right? I mean, they won on September 2nd, a game they probably were lucky to get anything from, if we're being honest. And they won back on pre-COVID days, March 7th against Miami. That's it right now. You need one of those. And the question I immediately ask is, where are the goals going to come from? Yeah,
don't forget. Remember, we scored a first half goals the first time since September 2019, 2 games ago. So you got that going for us, which is pretty nice.
I hope, again, I'm different. I'm having more of a neutrals perspective, and I can afford to rank aesthetics highly, but I really hope that he opens things up and lets him try and play a little bit, gets Higuain on the field earlier, just see if they can play some soccer. Let's try it.
That's not even the mindset of a neutral. That's just the mindset of an aesthetic individual. I don't, particularly at this point in the year, I don't care if they get into the playoffs. That doesn't matter to me at all. I just want to enjoy watching these games.
Entertain us.
I don't care.
Life is hard right now.
Right. Yeah. Just give me some joy. Give me any bit of joy. A 0-0 draw gives me very little joy. So think of me, Ben, as you make your plans.
I think there's more people that feel that way than perhaps in the past here in DC, and my hope is that Ben understands that or feels that on some level, but we'll see.
We will see. Charlie, thank you for joining us. I had just talked about always doing plugs at the start of the show, and because I was in charge of steering the show, I forgot to do the one thing I always tell Ted to do. So at the end of the show, after everyone's listened to a whole hour of very sad podcasting, tell people where they can find you and what any sort of pieces that you've come out with recently that you really want people to take a look at.
Yeah, actually, I think it looks like I'm going to have a DC United Ben Olsen column running tomorrow on the league site on MLSsoccer.com. So come and yell at me about that whenever that drops. At CBOEHM is my handle. That's where most of my work goes up on the Twitter website. And then I'm on USSoccerPlayers.com as well and other outlets. But drop me a tweet or an email. Hit me up, guys.
Visit the link on Reddit of that article and all the people under it just saying #Olsen out. If you want to find somewhere to go, that's where you'll be. And from our side, just listen to the show. Make sure you're following us on all the million channels that we are broadcast on. If you're listening to the show already, you're already listening to the show, so keep doing that. We're selling T-shirts now, and they're going to ship at the end of the month. People have asked for them, and less people have bought them than have asked for them. So this is me saying, this is on you. If you've talked about it, this is on you. So make sure you buy.
Please clap.
That's right. Please clap. I always never wanted a career in sales, and now I have one. Thank you for tuning into the show. Thank you again for Charlie for being our first guest co-host. And we'll be back next week, hopefully talking about a win against Atlanta, and the clouds will part, and Ted and I will talk about our playoff chances. And if not, come back for more of the sad hour with John and Ted. We'll be back next Monday, 8:30. Vamos.